Well, good evening, folks. My name is Todd Redmond. I'm the chair of the Lake County DFL, and we'll be kind of working with our technical team tonight to moderate this evening's event. I will be monitoring questions, so if you have questions, please put them in the chat room, and I will dutifully note them. And when it's appropriate, we'll ask those questions. But as you have questions, please note them in the chat area. I'd like to welcome this evening our two speakers, Katya Gordon. She's a voluntary state coordinator with the Citizens Climate Lobby. She co-leads with the local chapter and the at-large group, as well as being active with the state leadership team. She writes frequently for the media, conducts interviews regularly relating to climate change in the Two Harbors community radio station, and has published a book, Climate Change, Musings and Stories from Lake Superior to North Shore. If people are interested, how might they find this book?
They can go to Sweet Pea or they can get it directly from me.
Okay.
And I'll have my information at the.
Yeah, well, we'll make sure that you have the information that if you're interested in purchasing a copy, that we can make sure you have that. Our second speaker tonight is Mike Overend. He's an almost retired veterinarian. He and his wife, Dr. Lucy Grin, co-owned a veterinary practice in Two Harbors and Grand Marais for nearly 34 years. In 2014, they moved to take action about the climate crisis and joined the Citizens Climate Lobby, helping to form the Two Harbors and Duluth chapter that Katya and Mark Gordon created. Mike and Lucy also participated in the Climate Reality Leadership Training Project in Minneapolis in August 2019. This forum is part of a larger forum series that the Lake County DFL has sponsored to bring forth issues of importance. We surveyed some of our members and tried to get issues of interest to our membership across the county. And this was one of the topics that kind of rose to the point where we thought we should try to bring some discussion. I'd like to thank our committee members, our forum committee members, Phil Arnold, Marty Anderson, and Paul Diener, for doing the work kind of behind the scenes to bring these forums to our membership. So I will get out of the way now. And if you do have questions throughout the forum, send them put them in the chat box on Zoom. We have a few folks here in our live setting, and we'll keep those questions for the time when it's appropriate to ask them.
Sure.
Okay, without further ado, thank you.
All right, I'm going to try to speak to my live audience, but be aware that you're my hybrid audience too. And just start by saying thank you for having us, and thank you for coming, and thank you for being engaged citizens. And it's just a pleasure to be here. So fun, even with a tiny little crowd. So Mike's going to help me with my PowerPoint. Ready? Yes. So I'm just going to, most of you know me already, but I'm Katya Gordon, and I have been active with Citizens Climate Lobby, which really transformed for me climate change from something that felt sort of isolating and very hopeless and depressing to something that felt really quite energizing, because ever since 2014, we've really been all about the solution, and that's a heck of a lot better than spending a lot of time on the problem, which continues to be a big problem. It's a big problem, and we're solving it. All right. You know, everybody has the one thing about climate change is everyone has a connection to our climate, and because it's really about being connected to our earth. So here's my story. I grew up in Philadelphia, and we had icy, miserable winters. It would go snow, ice, rain, snow, ice, rain. And when I moved to Minnesota in 91, that was 91, the Halloween blizzard, and I died and went to heaven. And this was real winter. And that was also when I was beginning to learn about climate change. And I thought, I've arrived too late. which in a way I haven't, but in a way, it's true that winters are one of the biggest affects of climate change for us in the Northland. And I would never have guessed that first winter of 1991, I was north of Ely, right on the edge of the Boundary Waters for the whole winter. And I remember the caretaker of the place where I was commenting at the time that it was just amazing to him. He was just observing how often the temperatures were above zero. And now I'm here 30 years later, they're discussing in Ely how the temperatures are above freezing. That's 30-degree difference. And so our winters are dramatically changing. Luckily, there is still snow and there's still skiing, and I still have a lot to fight for. But that's where I came about. And the first time I thought, when it rains in December, that's when everyone's going to take notice here. It's just so outlandish. And it rained in December, and people were kind of, I did not see anything. Like, I just am amazed at how quickly we all adapt. Now it just seems like we're all used to rain in December. But that is what I remember about Philadelphia 30 years ago. In 1990, oh, I told you about that. So the other story, so that's just my husband, Mark. We lead the Snowshoe River, up the river gorges, river trips. And it just, you know, there is a selfish part of me that I love winter. And so that is definitely part of my passion about working on climate change. But we took it to another level when my husband and I also do sailing trips. We lived aboard our boat for a couple different years at a time. We were sailing down the East Coast, took the last window out of New York City before Hurricane Sandy. Of course, we didn't know it at the time, but had we stayed in New York, we probably would have lost our boat. As it was, we were down in North Carolina, anchored in a river, and did fine. But it really changed the way we thought about climate change because it was so immediate. It destroyed the entire coastline. We could hear in the weather people's voices, you know, that they could not tell what this was going to be. They had never seen anything like this. So we heard the fear in the experts' voices. And then we sailed down the coast afterwards, and it was really almost impossible. Like, there were entire towns that were abandoned. There were times, a lot of times, you know, it was really not safe to go into the coast because the buoys had all moved. The Coast Guard told us, this is out of our control. Like, don't try to do this, don't try to do that. So after Hurricane Sandy, we returned back home and felt it was time to do more than what we were doing, and that we were kind of buffered from climate change, even though Minnesota is changing so fast. It's, in a way, it's much subtler than sea level rise and other things that are hitting the coast. So that's when we joined the Citizens Climate Lab. Now, I have a feeling that just about everybody here already knows these things, so I'm not going to belabor a lot of sort of what climate change is. What it looks like for us, and what it looks like in the larger world, you know, we're pretty specific to more and severe weather events, more variability, and the farther north you go, the stronger the change. And our changes are also stronger in winter than in summer, and they're also stronger at nights than days. So our winter nights are what are changing the fastest by far. Go ahead. All right. So we're probably not going to, you know, get heat stroke here in northern Minnesota. What's really happening more is these extreme weather events. And we could talk on and on and on about this. There are much better people to talk about this than me. Right now, I'm just going to show that this is something that is important because everyone cares about money. And whenever I hear this idea that the government can't get involved in climate change because we like less government, the better, I agree with that. However, the amount the government is going to be involved in disaster relief in this country is so much higher than anything that the government could do as a preventative, and in fact has already done. And so this just shows the cost of many of the disasters. Go ahead. Oh, keep going. Since the 1980s, our temperatures have risen 1 degree Celsius. The real costs of this have gone up 5 times. The number of events that cost more than $1 billion has gone up 4 times more, billion-dollar events than we used to have. All right, onward. How long do we have? Go ahead. This probably isn't news to anyone else either. And I personally think the truth is nobody really knows. Every number has been less than what they've said so far. So I think scientists tend to be very conservative in their estimates. So I don't actually know what the tipping point is when things will get exponentially worse even than they are, but it's coming. All right, so what is the Citizens Climate Lobby? Some people get a bad taste in their mouth from the word lobby, and I used to as well, until I really realized that we live in a democracy, and the way we need to vote every 4 years and then live your own life apart from your democracy is really that's not keeping up to our responsibilities of being in a democracy. We need to let our democratic elected officials know what we want, and sometimes that takes a lot of work. And so the Citizens Climate Lobby is a volunteer organization of people who have learned and are learning to talk to our government about what we want and to build the political will to make it happen. So that's really what we're all about. And when they first started working on this, our founder, Marshall Saunders, talked to a lot of people, and he's a renowned world changer already with other causes like poverty and microloans. And so he decided that it was sort of like the hardest thing he could come up with, but the one that was really going to solve the problem was to price carbon. And that was where scientists and economists really came together and said that will solve the problem. It's also the most politically difficult thing to do. But Marshall Saunders is not one to take the easy road. So he said, if this is what's going to solve the problem, that's really what we're about, more than about doing something that's easy or that's going to work. So this was back in 2009, and the Citizens Climate Lobby was born. And what we say is that we build political will for a livable world, because everything else is in place. We have the technology to do it. We have the knowledge to do it. We have the knowledge about the problem, but what we're lacking is the political will to do it. That is the single barrier. Yeah. I think you need to go get it. So what did he base this on? Now Mike's going to do a whole series with you in the second half hour about what, there are so many climate solutions out there, and they have varying degrees of effectiveness and varying degrees of cost. So Mark's going to do that analysis for you. So if you have questions about that, I hope you'll wait and see what he has to say about it. But here's what we know about solutions. They need to actually solve the problem. And this seems quite basic, but believe it or not, there's a lot of solutions out there that don't make that big of a difference. So it needs to drive large scale change quickly. And then we also are living in an increasingly equitable world. So we're just really not willing to sort of do it on the backs of poor people. And there are many ways that climate solutions do sort of increasingly affect people in underserved communities. They are also the people that are the most affected by climate change. If you think about it, islands around the world are more poor people live on islands, and the tropical islands are the worst affected by climate change because they're the ones close to sea level rise. They're the poorest, and they're the ones that are so they're being affected the most, and they did contribute the least. So this needs to be healthy for the planet. Obviously, it needs to be durable. So that's when we work with our legislators. We know that executive solutions come and go every 4 years. And so we have really focused not on executive decision making. Like in Canada, they got carbon pricing pretty quickly through their prime minister. And it's, well, it is lasting, thank goodness, but it is, we can see in our own country when executive orders happen, what happens in 4 years? It goes back the other way, flip, flop, flip, flop. We need solutions that's going to last for decades, because that's what it's going to take to solve climate change. Go ahead. So this is a solution, and I'm going to just give you the very basic. And if you have questions, that's fine too, because this is a little bit can be confusing for people. So pricing carbon, you can price carbon all different ways. You can do cap and trade, you can do it various incentives and regulatory solutions. And there's a whole, so think of this whole block of regulatory solutions over here. And that's what the executive branch can do. That can be emissions standards, that can be, you know, all kinds of standards or all kind of programs to incentivize clean energy. And with those solutions, you know, they have their place. They're needed to some degree, because there's nothing that's going to, we need an all-out approach. But the problem with regulatory solutions is they are very complex. They come from a government entity that is itself, you know, it's going to have its own bias. So there is going to be sort of some governmental organization that's going to decide, you know, how much can we pollute? What's going to be our cap? Whereas carbon pricing is the only thing the government does is send a market signal with a fee. So the fee goes as close to the source as it can be to make it as simple as possible. So putting a fee on where the fossil fuels either come out of the ground or come into our country from the border. So the only direct fee in our system is to the companies that are bringing the oil out of the ground, or the gas or the methane. It's still too complicated because, you know, there's methane coming out of cows. I mean, there's just so much, but you can still basically, the amount of carbon coming out of the ground is already recorded. It's not even like we need new data to do this. We know how much carbon is coming out of the ground. We can put a fee on it that is steadily rising in a way that will be predictable, so that companies can all plan for it. In fact, they are already planning for it, because the companies that are smart, they know that this is coming. So you charge a fee at the source, and then there's all this money coming in. And we originally called this carbon fee and dividend, because what we thought was the most equitable and simple and bipartisan answer to all that money coming in would be to give it right back to the households with individual dividend checks, very similar to the Alaska dividend, with so little administrative costs. And it makes sense because the poorer you are in this country, the more your dollar means. And so most of our fossil fuels are used by people at the top. Like if you have 3 houses and a boat and a plane, you use a lot more fossil fuels, or if you travel around the world, and so people at the bottom or even in the middle stand to get back more in this monthly check than they actually have to pay in higher prices. They've done lots of studies about this. And in Minnesota, you know, it's been even done studies just in state by state. And in Minnesota, you know, more than half of Minnesotans would stand to get more back in a check than they have to give back. And those who would lose big time, quote unquote, because they're using so many fossil fuels, but yet they only get the same check back. Those are people very high income that A, can afford to pay for this pollution, and B, can afford to make the changes needed to lower their carbon footprint, i.e. buy the electric car, or redo your house, or do the major changes that would need to be made. So the money is collected and then it's sent right back out. It doesn't grow government. It's a market-based solution. Democrats like it because it's fair and equitable and actually solves the problem of climate change. Republicans like it because it's a market-based solution. It doesn't grow government. And that's Citizens Climate Lobby's thoughts anyway. Of course, politics has different ideas. Go ahead. So I kind of just described this. Oh, the final piece of this, of course, is a border tax adjustment. So everyone says, well, what about China? What about Russia? And this has evolved very quickly in the last year, because we used to say, yes, we would have a border adjustment to level the playing field so that all the dirty stuff wouldn't come in from China, or we couldn't outsource to China. But that is all changing very quickly, because the rest of the world, most of the world has priced carbon at this point. We are really lagging behind. Europe is talking very seriously. They may even have committed to, they are enacting a border adjustment on us. And the interesting thing about this is that US steel, for instance, is more cleanly produced than most steel in the world. So if we have a carbon price, we stand to win in this level of the playing field, because we have the relatively clean carbon products. But if we have no carbon price, we don't get any credit for that, and we just pay the adjustment to Europe. So Canada has also talked about a border adjustment. This stuff is really coming. And so we used to talk about we would like to lead the world, and now we're talking about we don't want to fall behind to the point where we really, really lose. And that is true on the micro level too. Like our energy, the more we're getting energy from coal through Minnesota Power, the more expensive it's going to be relatively, because renewables are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So that's that for that. Here are the benefits of what we're talking about. They solve the problem. We'll get more into that later because this is all being discussed in Congress right now. Makes for affordable clean energy. Of course, the health piece. This is something that most people really don't realize the extent of this. The amount of increased health, and maybe we don't feel this here so much because we are blessed with the cleanest air practically on the planet, I believe. But go into any other area, any urban area, and it makes a huge difference. In fact, when the pandemic hit, there were studies that showed that more people's lives were saved from the increased air cleanliness in China than were lost in COVID by far. So, I mean, just puts a little perspective on, where our priorities are and what we should be able to do here. And this would save, hundreds of thousands of lives. There's lots of studies about health. And everyone likes the idea of putting money in your pocket, getting a stimulus check. Yes.
So as long as you're on this topic, we have
Yes.
a question from one of our Zoom participants asking, how specifically does a carbon dividend end up in the pockets, so to speak, of ordinary citizens?
Yes, so that's a really good question. The question was how would this work? And the answer is it really is quite simple. Like they hired a man who had worked for the U.S. Treasury for his whole career to say, what would you do if this was the plan? And he just put together a plan that is very similar to the Alaska oil dividends. The money all goes into the U.S. Treasury. It's basically like Social Security. So there's a tiny administrative cost for the envelopes and the system, and I'm sure there would be some people working, but what it would look like would be that everyone would get a check, and hopefully we'd be savvy enough that we could figure out how to have it directly deposited into our bank accounts. But there would be this inflow of cash directly.
And it's an equal.
Thank you. Equal shares for everybody, half shares for children. And an interesting thing I find about this, like I tallied a few numbers to say, like, because they've done so many studies to say how much would this check be, of course, what would a family actually get, and a certain number of years, it's depending on how fast we cut carbon, of course, but it might be $400 a month, within 10 years. And I thought, if anyone offered Lake County about $1 million a year in just stimulus check, we would be rolling out the red rug. Like, holy cow, like this is amazing what's being offered here. And especially when we know that this is more than offsetting any increase in prices. And just to give a little perspective, 15 cents. So the proposal is for $15 per ton of carbon, going up $10 a year. $15 per ton of carbon is about the same as 15 cents at the pump. So you go from $3 a gallon to $3.15 a gallon the first year. And if we think about how OPEC has controlled our prices to go from $5 to $2, I mean, the change is so much less, it's so much steadier. Go ahead. So this just expresses how, well, actually Mike's gonna talk about this, so I don't even want to talk about this. The other piece is, of course, the job piece, and just the very basic truth is that green energy is so much more labor intensive than fossil fuels. And so, any discussion of jobs needs to be honest about that and to really show that the faster we change, the more jobs there are going to be. They're going to be different jobs, but they're not going to be necessarily all computer jobs either. Actually, the most sought after job in areas where this is really advanced is wind turbine technician. Like that's a real, and then think about if every home is going to be retrofitted with better insulation, and think about the electric chargers that need to be put everywhere. I mean, the jobs not only to establish a green economy, but then to keep it in place. It's just a much more labor intensive thing. So jobs.
Sorry. Apologies here. Forward.
Yes,
Again.
one more. I already talked about this, saves lives, go ahead. Families get paid. Oh, so that was, yeah, that was, I already kind of been through this. Yeah.
I probably missed it. How does that, the money being paid by producers, it comes into our pocket? How does that limit carbon? I mean, how does it, is it a game changer? Or does
Right.
it make the producers realize, yeah, I'm losing money here?
Yes, so thank you. He's basically saying, why would this drive down carbon? And the simple answer is just economics 101 is as the price goes up, people and businesses innovate and innovate and innovate, and the technologies all change. So it becomes like, and fossil fuel companies, even in anticipation of something like this, have already started reworking how they do business and what they're planning to do. So as it gets more and more expensive, just supply and demand, less and less will come out of the ground. And then on our level, what we see is plastic bags go from 50 cents to $1, whereas paper bags stay the same. So then we start using more paper bags and less plastic bags. Or, I mean, it's just the thing that is so compelling about a carbon price is because fossil fuels are integrated into our entire economy, every product, there's a fossil fuel somewhere in there. So there's really no way to regulate it out of business. I mean, we can try, and they're trying, like they pick the transportation sector or they pick construction, and they can fiddle with that, and they can fiddle with this and say this product is better than this product. But if you do a market signal and the price just goes, like, how do you know? I always say, how do we know who's using more carbon? The cross-country skier or the downhill skier who flies to Colorado once a year and stays in a condo and uses the share lifts, or the snowmobiler who stays in northern Minnesota and drives a snowmobile around. Who knows? We don't know because we don't have any signal to tell us. It's like, this is our education of what is carbon intensive and what isn't. And so then we just buy it. People who don't even believe in climate change also become part of the solution because everyone buys the cheaper product. That's just what we do. And I think you have a follow-up.
I have the producers again. I don't want to paint them as the evil empire, but
Right.
they are.
Well, the assumption is they will pass on the costs. They're going to have higher costs.
Okay, now to get them to do that, it reminds me of tilting of windmills, because you know that's huge money and huge outfits, and they're not going to want to do it unless somebody politically holds a gun to their head.
There'll be a law.
Okay, so and that's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
How do you get them to? How do you get them off zero here? I mean, how do you get them to move forward?
Well, you don't dictate any behavior change. They just have to pay a fee. And the higher and more carbon they pull out, the higher the fee.
So it's the government that would enforce that?
Yeah.
So then we have to fight their lobbies.
Right. But you might be surprised to know that companies aren't inherently against this. And that is because they know they're not going to be able to pollute for free forever. And they like it, and I like to believe there's some ethical business people in there that are just doing their business. And the business says that what you like is for things to be predictable and fair. And so if they're convinced that it's fair and predictable, it's politically much easier to pass. Now, everyone has different interpretation of what's going on. I mean, technically, we have a list of, including ExxonMobil, big companies that have endorsed this because it's fair and it's predictable. It's better than the regulatory nightmare that they see coming. Some people say, oh, they just say that because they know it'll never happen. Or, when it really comes down to it, they're going to fight this tooth and nail. And I mean, I just think it depends on the industry. I mean, I've seen all different industries be doing all different things. So I'm not ready to say I know what the fossil fuel lobbyists is, but I will say, this has been 10 years working on a problem that is, essentially a crisis. So there's a lot of interest against change for sure.
There are some companies who have said they agree with that.
Yeah, actually, we could put a list, maybe we should keep going, that's possible. Yeah, I don't have the list, but I could give you a pretty amazing list of,
that's
yeah,
okay.
it is. It was definitely surprised, that's part of the work with Citizens Climate Lobby, you start looking for endorsements and including from big companies. And we have painted a picture that's really different than what you mostly see in the media. I don't necessarily think it's the fossil fuel companies that are the biggest holdup here. Believe it or not, and actually business is really getting on board with it. Like the US Chamber that would not even acknowledge climate change until just a year or two ago. Now they're all about the carbon pricing approach. So what we do is build political will. We go to Congress. We have all these different layers of actions we do, including direct lobbying, but we also get endorsements, because what we know is what our elected officials need to hear is, who do they need to hear from? That's the first thing that we need to know. Who do you need to hear from and then we're going to go find that. Like with Representative Staver, we've had him talk with forest people, like pretty high in the timber industry, that explain how this will benefit forestry industry. And believe it or not, like Northeast Minnesota stands to win from this economically, because the demand for iron and steel is actually huge in a green economy. And so I don't think they get it yet, but that is the reality, is that, there are areas that will lose with green energy, but ours is not one of them. And we actually have an amazing opportunity to become a manufacturing area again, because there's no reason that we should ship all our iron down to Ohio and Toledo for it to turn into steel and then become wind turbines. We could make them right here. And this is what, turning iron into steel is what the Iron Range has been trying to do for a long time, but it's always been too cheap to ship it down to Toledo. And if suddenly it's more expensive to ship it down to Toledo because of carbon pricing, and it's not so cheap anymore to do any kind of transportation, then maybe we'll do it right on the Iron Range. So lots of opportunity. And that's what we work on. We also, do a lot of media stuff, and we talk to people like you. Yeah.
There is a cruel irony when we talk about the benefit to Minnesota of increased steel production. Every ton of steel that is produced causes the release of 1.5 to 2 tons of carbon into the atmosphere because of the necessary use of coking coal to cause the reduction of the iron ore to end up with steel. There are methods of reducing iron ore that do not use coal,
Right.
but those methods require the use of the consumption of considerable amounts of energy to produce the hydrogen necessary to do that. So increasing steel production can be a kind of a cruel catch.
Right.
Yep.
But I would also say that if the pressure to reduce overall increases dramatically, because these companies that are making iron or bring iron out of the ground, yes, there's suddenly huge demand, but there's also a huge cost because they're a very energy intensive process. So then they have major incentive to clean up their process. And we also have major incentive to reduce the amount of iron in the world total. Like, are we recycling iron even 1/10 of what we could be doing? And so we need all these forces to come together. But you are right. And I like to say, the only thing this solves is the climate crisis. Our mining issues will continue to happen. This is not going to solve mining problems or mining disagreements. It's just going to solve the climate part. And so in my mind, that's what I'm focused on. And I'm not going to get into big arguments about copper or nickel or iron or steel. I just feel like we need to solve our climate crisis, and we also need to solve those things, but this is forefront for me. Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you. And I mentioned that 3 years ago, a friend of mine, we had a tour at the local Louisiana Pacific plant. Their met plant manager told a group of about 50 builders, They were looking at 3 new plants in Canada because they're not sure that this forest is going to be sustainable to keep their product on board. And at that time, they were building one in British Columbia, a plant. And they had scheduled 2 more. So big outfits see this.
Yeah. Yeah, there is so much change right now, shifting. I think many people are not aware how huge forces are changing as we speak. And so that's a good example. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so one thing we're working on really right now that I would love it if all of you walk away and are inspired to do something. CCL USA, that's Citizens Climate Lobby USA.org. Is if you just go to our website and click on calling. Right now we're trying to call our senators, and this brings us to the present. I forget if I have another slide about this. Well, not really. So you're probably aware of what's going on in politics right now. We just signed this big infrastructure package. There is a reconciliation bill. And because the Democrats have control of House right now and Senate, sort of, so there's a lot of attention on this reconciliation bill. And in August, we went on a massive campaign to tell the Senate, please make carbon pricing part of the reconciliation package. It is absolutely a budgetary issue, and it's a budgetary solution. It's going to solve all your problems because it pays. It doesn't cost money, and amazingly, it really did seem to be a game changer, because pretty soon we started getting leaks that the Senate was discussing carbon pricing. We've been telling them to do this for 10 years, but now it suddenly was, all this work was coming to the fore, and we have a few senators who are telling us how it's going, and they've been saying all along it is possible to have carbon pricing by this fall in the reconciliation package. Biden's goals cannot be reached without carbon pricing, and he knows that. Everyone knows that, who looks at the research and who looks at all the studies that have been done about what does what. And so we have a very strong hand to play by saying, if you really mean it about your goals, there's only one way to get there, and that is to have carbon pricing be the baseline of every other thing that you do. And so if you don't mind, please call. Right now we're calling Senators Klobuchar and Smith because, as you know, the Democratic process, the Democrats are essentially working only with themselves on this reconciliation package. And they have to bring together the progressives and the moderates to just pass something. And it really is the perfect solution. It makes total sense to put carbon pricing in there. So we really hope it's going to happen. So that's a good action for you. And as a standalone, though, we also, there's several, but there's one bill in Congress right now that is essentially exactly what we've been advocating for. It's called the Energy Innovation Act. That's the website. So you are so welcome to look that up and learn more about, our ideal plan. But we're also really looking at getting carbon pricing in this fall, like imminently. So that's really exciting. Mike could probably add a lot to this too. He's totally a partner in all this. We've been working together for about 8 years on this single thing. So we're very committed. I think that's it, but go punch one more. That's my info. There's my book. If you're watching this in hybrid and you want my book, I'd love to get it to you. Just find me or go to Sweet Pea or any of the books along the bookstores on the North Shore.
I'm going to start with a quote. Anybody want to give a crack at who said this in 1999 at the Sheet Metal Workers Union? We all do better when we all do better.
Paula Wellstone.
All right, she gets the prize, and that's really what this is about. He had it right. Because what I'm going to talk about tonight and what Katja was talking about tonight is we all do better when we all do better. And that's what this is designed to do. And the other thing that I'm going to just emphasize is that for all of those out there who were like me and who believed that climate change was something that was not going to happen for a long time, but then it did. And it was going to take hundreds of years. And it turned out that it's only taken a few. and that it was a problem that was insurmountable, I was wrong. There is hope. There really, truly is hope. And I'm going to finish by adding on to what Katja said, that in the Senate right now, the reconciliation bill potentially contains a price on carbon. They need 50 votes to pass that bill. They have 49. Okay, that's how close this is right now. And this group has been working their butts off for the last 15 years to get this piece of legislation through Congress. And we have never, ever, ever been this close. So knock on wood, it's going to happen. Okay.
Joe Manchin.
Yeah.
I'm not saying which West Virginia guy that is. And we can't do anything about it. This is something the West Virginians have to do, but they are working really hard to get him to go. So I'll just say that I got involved with CCL at the inception up here after Katja invited us to a 350.org event, and then was able to get the ball rolling for CCL in Two Harbors. And I was lucky enough to be sitting on her couch for the very first meeting. And she and her family are real climate heroes in this town and along the North Shore. And I don't think people really recognize just how much they've done. So I want to just say thank you.
Couldn't do without you, Mike.
Oh, well, we work together. And my wife, Lucy, is, she's more than I'm doing. She signed us up to go to the Climate Reality Project leadership training in 2019 in Minneapolis. It was really a great experience. And I am just coming to the end of my career as a veterinarian. And what I'm planning on doing, as she is as well, is we're planning on just taking every bit of free time and energy we've got and putting it into Citizens Climate Lobby, because this is the most important thing that we can try to do for the future. We have 2 young adult children, and this isn't for us. This is for them, and it's for their kids and their kids. So this is something that's really important to us, and we hope that we're going to do something good for them. I'm going to tell you that right now, the DFL recognizes climate change and is trying to do something about it. I'm going to say that their colleagues across the aisle recognize climate change, but so far they really have not decided to do something about it. That doesn't mean that they're not going to, but it does mean that this party is taking action, and they are really trying to get something done. And I'm just going to suggest to you that this is a key point that you need to work with. I think it came up in your poll, and that this is not a partisan issue. This is a humanitarian issue. Okay, this is about our future as a race, and so as a species. And it's not just our future; it's every living thing is affected by this. So this is the big time, folks. And the pandemic has been horrible. It's just been a horrible, horrible situation. But this is just a taste of what's going to happen. So we really need to get our act together. And that means we need to work with the people across the aisle, and they need to get their act together too. But if you want to bring more people into the DFL tent, this is an issue. This is an issue that sets you apart. And you got an opportunity here to get something done by making sure that people know you are trying to take action. And not necessarily partisan, but you want to get something done. I know that Katja just talked to you about pricing carbon, and she did a great job on that. And I'm gonna talk to you about that as well. She also spoke about CCL being a nonpartisan organization, or bipartisan, whatever you want to call it. But we are just working together to try to find a solution to a horrible humanitarian crisis. And so we do that by trying to generate the political will to create a livable world. And I'm going to show you really quickly one of the ways that you can talk to people about this and try to foster a discussion, because the most important thing that needs to happen is we need to talk. We're doing it right now. This is really good, But this needs to happen on a huge scale, okay? And luckily, we have seen much more about climate. I shouldn't say luckily. I will just say that we have seen much more about climate in the last couple of years, just because of the magnitude and the severity of all the weather crises that have happened. But it also is really good, at least in the news media that I watch, to see that it's mentioned almost every single day, whereas in the past, it hardly got any attention at all. So I'm going to shift now, and I'll just run through this really quickly. But that's my wife, Lucy, our dogs. We moved up here from Minneapolis area because we love the North Shore. I'm going to show you some heroes. This is Dr. Evel Gorham. He taught me in my undergrad at the University of Minnesota. He was a limnologist, a lake specialist. He's the guy that figured out acid rain. And he did a lot of work up in Sudbury, Ontario, where they have a nickel mine and a nickel smelting plant. And he showed us slides that showed a moonscape. It was the surface of the moon for 20 miles around that nickel smelting smokestack. So he really believed in what he was doing. And there are other heroes. This is Will Steger, international presence who believes in climate change. Really interesting story is he grew up across the street from my uncle in Richfield. And he told me at a meeting that my uncle had a lot to do with how he turned out. So my uncle was kind of a wild man. And he is too. This is another hero. And this person probably has more courage than I could ever hope to ever have. And she's somebody who's going to leave an imprint on the world. And it's going to be a good one. Here's another person named Jay Butera. People don't know him except in CCL, but this guy is another hero because he spent, I don't know how much time actually getting the ball rolling to have Democrats and Republicans start to talk in Congress about climate. And I've never met him, but I'd love to. These are local heroes. And they're really a handsome family, but they're people that have really done a lot of good in our community. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And this is another local hero, Dr. Eric Enberg, practices down in Duluth. He's speaking at College of St. Scholastica here during a climate forum. He's another member of CCL, and he's worked his tail off to help us do better with climate. Really incredible man.
And you're heroes too.
So that's why we got involved with this. And we hope that you will too. I'm going to just unashamedly tell people, I know this is the DFL, but this organization needs your help. You can do it. We're not asking for a huge amount of time. It's just like Katja said, we need you to pick up the phone. We need you to write letters. I wrote a letter to the editor this morning. I wrote one over the weekend. You can do it. But picking up the phone and talking to people, that's it. So, and this is the reason why. These are my kids, our kids, and they're going to inherit the problem. Did you know that the amount of fossil fuels that we burned, half of that's been, ever since it started way back at the beginning of the steam engine, early 1700s, right, Tom? The beginning of the Industrial Revolution, all of the carbon dioxide that's been released into our atmosphere over all of that period of time, over half of it we've dumped in the last 20 years. So we're responsible. This is what we did at our business. We put solar in. We did it at home too. We just remodeled our home. Not everybody can do this. We've been really fortunate. We had the wherewithal to do this, but we felt it was important because we wanted to walk the talk, okay? And we also went to the climate reality leadership training in Minneapolis. And this was the Minnesota contingent that was there, and great people. And this is the auditorium that was packed. I can't remember the exact number. I want to say it was about 1,200 people. And they came from 47 different states and 47 different countries. But they all came for one reason, and that was this, that they know that this is what we're fighting for. And there is no planet B. This is our planet A, and we don't get a second chance, a second shot at this. So the Earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens. And that is a picture from space of our atmosphere. That thin blue line is the only thing that keeps us alive, period. It's 20 miles thick approximately. You could drive to Duluth, and if you went straight up, you'd be out of the atmosphere. And if it wasn't for that atmosphere, this planet that we're on would be nothing but a ball of ice. Okay, it's important because it helps us gain some heat that we really need, but it doesn't give us too much heat because we don't want to end up cooking. Well, we know that solar radiation comes in, hits the atmosphere, it passes through, and some of that heat is absorbed from the sun. Some of it is actually radiated back out, and that's okay. Before we had too much greenhouse gases, we didn't have to worry about it. But the addition of greenhouse gases, the carbon dioxide and the other gases that have been introduced into the atmosphere, primarily from burning fossil fuels, have made it so that our atmosphere traps too much heat. So the question is, how much extra stuff are we putting into the atmosphere? And this is a slightly dated slide, but it says we're spewing 110 million tons of global warming pollution into the atmosphere every day. It's more like 160 million tons right now. Okay, every day, 160 million tons. Can you wrap your head around how much that is? That's an enormous amount of material. So what does that do? So that extra heat trapping gas, it traps a lot of heat that we wouldn't normally trap. So the Hiroshima atomic bomb, you can imagine how much heat was in that? 6 times every single second. I'll do it again, 6 times every second. That much heat is being added to our atmosphere. That blows my mind, okay? And this is what it looks like. That's how much heat is being added 6 times a second, every minute, every hour, every day, on and on and on. Okay? It does bad things. And it comes from the sources of greenhouse gases that warm our planet come from many different places, but primarily they come from coal, oil, and natural gas, okay? And this just shows how much global warming pollution has been going on due to fossil fuels. And what you can see here is way back, 1850, hardly any. We get up to the beginning of the century and started to see more. There was more right around here during World War II. And then we built the freeway system, and there was a chicken in every pot, and everybody got an Oldsmobile, and off we went. And this is what it's been doing. All right, so what I'm going to show you tonight is something that's called En-ROADS. And this is something that is it was designed to help people talk about climate. It is online, it's free. Anybody can get it, you don't have to sign up for it. You just type in En-ROADS in Google and up it comes. And it's an interactive tool that allows you to see the outcome of different climate policies. So the people that made this are a think tank at North Carolina State University called Climate Interactive, and they worked with the MIT Sloan Business School, and they released this in 2019. They had worked with they developed other types of tools in the past, but this is their most recent one. And they showed this to everybody in Congress. Okay. So this climate simulation tool does its work by you change things on these buttons right here. And it goes through 16,000 calculations, like 300 pages worth, like that. And it shows you the outcome on these graphs. And there are many different graphs in here. We don't have nearly enough time to go through this. But the main graph that we're going to use is one that says global sources of primary energy. And it shows the graph going from the year 2000 all the way out to the end of the century, 2100. And it shows different colors that represent different sources of our primary energy that we use in our society. And they are brown for coal, red for oil, blue for natural gas, green for renewable energy, that's wind, solar, hydroelectric, geothermal. Pink is bioenergy, so you can think of burning wood, trapping methane from landfills and burning that for energy. And it also shows nuclear in a pale blue that you can't hardly see here because it's such a skinny little line on the top. Lastly, there's a yellow button here for news zero. It's not on that screen, but that's some brand new high tech, never can imagine it, whether it's nuclear fusion or mini nuclear plants that people are bandying about that could potentially be a whiz kid solution to our energy future. Okay. On this graph here, this shows again year 2000 up to the year 2100, and this is our greenhouse gas emissions. And it also shows right here the amount of global warming that's predicted to happen by the end of the century. And right now it's at 3.6 degrees centigrade. Okay. Now that's going to vary depending upon which source you go to, but basically it's 3.6 degrees hotter centigrade than it was at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so we can see that our greenhouse gas emissions are going up here over time if we don't change anything. If we just keep doing what we're doing, this graph on the left shows that we're using more and more coal, more oil, more natural gas, more renewables, and even more bioenergy, and that our greenhouse gas emissions just keep going up. Now I'm going to change the graph on the right, and I'm going to go to what it actually what it does as far as changing our temperature. And it shows that right now, the temperature in 2021 is 1.29 degrees hotter than it was at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Okay. See the dotted lines here at 1.5 up to 2. This is the don't cross that line. You cross these lines, you're in for big trouble. And most experts have said that if we cross the 1.5 degree line, we're going to unleash things in our weather system that we will never, ever be able to put back in the bottle. Okay. So what it shows right here is that we are not very far from that 1.5 degrees. Okay. The time is ticking. And most people think that this is going to happen by about 2030. And that's about what this is showing. So we got about 8 years left. 9 years, something like that. All right. So briefly, there's 3 columns here. The left-hand column that says energy supply. This shows where we get our sources of energy right now. And they include the fossil fuels, the coal, oil, natural gas. They include bioenergy, renewable energy, nuclear, the new whiz-bang stuff. And then it also includes a carbon price here. Now I know that Katya talked to you about carbon price, and I want you to use carbon price, but I need to ask you to just wait. We're going to hold off on that until we get, let me just show you some other things first. So that's our energy supply. This is how we use our energy over here. We use it for transportation, cars, trucks, planes, railroads, ships. We use it to power buildings, industry, and manufacturing. And we also influence how much energy we use by how many people there are on the face of the planet. Because again, this is a global tool. This is not state, local, national. This is the big thing. So think Glasgow and the COP26 meeting that just ended. 2 weeks. That was pretty much every country on the planet was trying to come together and come up with a plan. This is what they needed to have in front of them all the time to say, well, is this going to work or not? Okay. So we can change our global population, but it isn't an easy thing to do. We can change how much, what our standard of living is too. We can say, we can tone down how much we want. And as long as the other guy is doing it too, it's fine. But there's a lot of people in the world right now that are trying to catch up to our standard of living because we live really well. And all you have to do is think back to Jimmy Carter's speech that lost him that election. And telling people to cut back is not a very politically palatable thing to do. At least Ronald Reagan sure made good use of it. Finally, over here on the right, these are other things that also affect our temperature change. And they include land and industry greenhouse gas emissions. So deforestation, that refers to cutting down forests. The main example is the Amazon. That is where much of a great portion of the carbon that is in our atmosphere gets drawn back down out of the atmosphere and put back in the ground where it needs to be. Carbon is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm made of carbon, you're made of carbon, everybody needs carbon. And there's a normal cycle between the ground and the atmosphere and the living things on the surface of the earth or in the air that all make use of carbon. But if it gets out of balance and too much carbon gets up into the atmosphere and creates that greenhouse gas effect with all those atom bombs worth of heat going off, that's bad. So we need to draw that carbon down and put it back into the soil where it doesn't do that. That's what the Amazon forest helps us do. But right now, the Amazon forest is being cut down at an incredibly fast rate so that Brazilian farmers can grow more beef and can plant palm oil trees so that I can eat my Oreo cookies. Okay. Methane, another. Methane is natural gas, okay? And natural gas is something that many of us burn in our homes to heat our homes, but it also is something that's released from coal mines as a byproduct. It's leaked out of natural gas wells at an incredible rate. It's leaked out of natural gas pipelines at an incredible rate. It doesn't get used for anything. It just leaks and goes up into our atmosphere. And methane is about 80 times more potent as a heating greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide is. Finally, methane also comes from cows, burping cows. And there are other gases as well. Nitrous oxide is another one, and or nitrogen oxide. Yeah, it's nitrous oxide, sorry. And that is released from soil when you farm and till the soil or plow the soil. It releases a lot of nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is about 298 times more potent as a heat trapping gas than carbon dioxide. So there are ways that we can fiddle with how much deforestation is going on, how much methane is being lost in the atmosphere. And there are ways that we can actually remove carbon from the atmosphere. We can plant more trees. Okay? We can also use technology to trap carbon. And Tom Kohler talked about the iron ore industry, and the steel companies are working on ways to try to figure out how to lower their carbon footprint. And it's a really interesting discussion because you're right, it's a two-edged sword as far as if we encourage a lot more steel to be produced to address climate change. I'm out of time.
Oh my God.
We forgive you.
There, turn the phone off. So anyways, so we're gonna go quick now. So what I'm gonna tell you is that we can change these things and see the outcome right here. And I'm going to tell you that at Glasgow, they agreed on some things. they said, let's drop methane by 30% by the year 2030. Okay, so we can do that. Now, if we drop methane, do we expect it to change how much energy comes or that we use? And is it going to make much of a difference with our end temperature here? I want you to just think about that for a second. And then I'm going to do it. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to drop methane by 30%. And here we go. Now, you didn't see much here, but I'm going to show it to you again. And what we see is we see this blue line go down just a titch from 3.6 to 3.5. So we actually help to reduce global warming by preventing the loss of all that methane into our atmosphere. And over here, in terms of our energy use, right here, let's see if it changed anything. I don't see anything moving. So what we did was, we did one of the things that all the nations of the world agreed to do that is going to address climate change. The question is, did it help? Little? Did it help enough? No. Okay. So this is supposed to be an interactive thing now. So I'm going to ask, another thing that was talked about was, they said we are going to stop cutting down the forest. They agreed on that. And they said that they were going to do it, and I checked this out. They were going to do it to a level that this can represent by me moving this lever all the way to the left. So my question is it going to change these sources of energy that we're using right now and in the future? And is it going to change our temperature? Anybody got a, just to make this quick, I'll just say, think about it for a second. And let's see what it does. Ready, go.
Yeah.
And it actually dropped the temperature by another 1/10 of a degree. Okay. Didn't do a dang thing over here to our sources of energy. So we're still burning the same amount of energy that we were planning on burning and all the same types, but it did help a little bit, didn't it? Okay. Those are the two things that came out of COP26 in Glasgow. Now, there's hopefully other things that are going to come out of that too. But in terms of when you look at all the work that went into that, all the people that worked on that, not very promising, is it? All right, now I'm going to ask if you wanted to change something, and as I said, please wait on carbon price. If you wanted to change anything here, somebody shout out what they want to change.
Cool.
Coal. All right. So we can stop, or we can diminish coal by putting taxes on it, on the people that produce it. Okay. So what do you think it's going to do here? And what do you think it's going to do here if I tax this to the maximum? Ready? Go. Okay. So we finally saw things shift. What we're seeing is we're seeing a drop in temperature of 0.2 of a degree right here. And we're seeing coal in brown get squished down pretty hard. We don't see any change in oil. We really don't see much of a change in natural gas, maybe a little bit, rose a little bit, and a little bit more renewable energy too, to take the coal's place. So it's a good thing to do. Did it do enough? No. Okay, need another thing. What else can we do?
Drilling, oil.
Oil.
Oil? Okay, we're gonna cut out oil. Watch and see what it does. Ready? So we just squished out oil right here. And I'll show it multiple times. The temperature went down again to 3.0, down by 0.2 of a degree. Oil squishes out, but it doesn't go away, does it? Okay.
What's the tolerable temperature increase by 2100? I mean,
1.5.
1.5. Okay.
1.5 degrees is what we're trying to get to. Okay. So any guesses on why the oil didn't go away completely? Who drives a gas car here? Anybody? Okay. How long is it going to last? Your car? Marlis?
Oh, I hope for another 10, 15 years.
There you go. That's your car right out there.
Yeah,
It's Marlis.
yeah.
Okay.
Should I-
Yeah.
I'll sell it.
there you go. But that's the idea, is it's really hard to change. And electric vehicles are just coming out. Okay. All right, what other things can we do here?
What's the blue?
Blue is natural gas.
Yeah, that's,
Okay, want to do that?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Huh,
Squish that down, went down to 2.9. It's better.
And the green?
Green is renewable energy.
Increase it.
increase it.
Ready? We're gonna try that. We're gonna increase renewable energy to the maximum. You ready? Here we go. Now, it really didn't change. You can see that actually the amount of energy right here that we're using actually goes up a little bit. Because anybody got a guess on why we would use more energy? Why do you buy more stuff?
Because it's cheaper.
Oh, that's a good answer. Okay, so I'm gonna leave the lights on because it doesn't cost me so much. Okay, so here's 2.8 degrees. All right, let's how about nuclear? Anybody here want to build more nuclear plants?
No,
Not the kind that we have now.
Not
Okay.
nuclear fission.
Not nuclear fission.
Fission is a whole different ballgame, and that's the ultimate power source for this world.
Okay, so you want some.
I want nuclear fusion.
Oh, fusion, okay. Well, we can do that right here. I've got that for this man right here. I've got fusion.
Zero.
Are you ready?
okay.
Let's build it. Here we go. Oh, did you see that? That yellow one up there?
Yeah.
Look at that, look at that. Now, when did it come on? Came on right here at about 2040, and it was going full tilt by about 2080. You gonna be around then? I'm not. All right, so what happened to renewable energy here? Got squished down because the new whiz-bang energy took the place of the renewable energy. Okay. And temperature, what happened to temperature? It went down a little tiny bit. That's okay. All right, let's do some other things here. What can we do here as far as transportation?
Electric cars.
All right, Marlis, are you gonna buy an electric car? Come on, woman.
I think I'll start riding a bike before I'll do that.
All right, so let's just pretend that you have that very first Ford F-150 Lightning on the block,
Okay,
and it's a red one, Marlis.
okay, excellent, thank
You
you.
ready? So everybody here is gonna electrify everything, and it's not just cars, it's railroads, it's trucks, it's airplanes, etc. We're getting down there. Now, another way we can do that is we can make cars more efficient, right? So I drive a Prius, and I used to drive a Windstar, and the Prius gets 2 times as much mileage. So that's important too. So that helps. Did you see how it dropped, how much energy we needed to generate? If we increase the efficiency of our transportation, and we can increase the efficiency of our buildings. So I just spent the whole last year having my house re-insulated, re-windowed, re-walled, everything. And if we do that to our businesses, if we electrify our businesses. Now, one important thing that you need to know is if you buy an electric car or you build all electric homes, like I just did, where you get your electricity matters. Because if I buy my electricity from a coal-fired power plant, did I really help the situation? No. If I get it from renewable energy, I do. Now, I know that I'm going over here, Todd. So,
Oh, that's okay.
are we okay?
Yeah.
Sorry to the audience. Just hang in there. We're almost done.
They can just hang up whenever.
Yeah, you can just hang up on me. All right. So
You
other
should
things that
say
we
that-
can do.
We should stop right here and just remind people that this will be recorded and will be made available. So if people do have to leave, the whole
Okay.
presentation will be available.
All right. So Todd just reminded us that this will be recorded and you can watch this at a later date. All right, trillion trees. Anybody hear of trillion trees? Okay, that was President Trump's answer to the climate problem. We're gonna just plant 1 trillion trees. Okay,
He wanted us to rake the forests too,
well, that too, but
because
let's
they're
plant the trees.
messy.
Let's plant the trees.
He has a
Let's see
plan.
let's see what planting 1 trillion trees does. And it helped, didn't it?
Yes.
Did it help enough? No, okay. And we can see down here on its little graph that you plant a tree in 2022 or 25. When is it doing its work? Out here at about 2080. All right. Takes a while to grow a tree, doesn't it? All right. It's not a bad thing, but it's not the answer. All right. But we're down to 2 degrees, folks. You're getting close. So what other things can we do here? Well,
Population.
we
Yeah,
can try population. Projected population by 2100 is about 11 billion people. And if we did everything we could to help with family planning, we can probably get it down to 9 billion people. Look at that. Did you see how much that made a difference? Nothing.
1 degree Fahrenheit.
Okay, yeah. But it's really interesting because there's a group called Drawdown that has looked at the 100 best ways to deal with climate. And the very top one is if we can help with education of women and girls across the world and help them with family planning, that does do more good than almost anything else.
They're leaving out half the population. They're leaving half the population out. There's guys that are part of the problem too.
Okay. So, and we can also go back to a simpler lifestyle, more sustainability. And we can try to do this right now. Here we go. It helps, but it's not perfect. Okay, so there's one more over here that I really haven't touched, as well as carbon pricing. Technology, a lot of people are counting on this. They want science to save our butts, okay? And there's a lot of people that are working on this. But right now, to capture a ton of CO2, to kind of vacuum it out of the air and pump it underground, costs about $2,000 per ton. Anybody remember what I said as far as how many tons of carbon dioxide are going up in the atmosphere right now? 160 million tons a day. Take that times $2,000. Somebody else do the math. I can't afford that. Okay. And even if they drop that price 100 times, would it still be the answer? If your toilet is flowing, it's plugged and it's flowing and flowing and flowing over onto the floor, is the answer to mop it as fast as you can, or should you reach under and turn off the valve? Who here has not turned off the valve? Okay. But if we count on technology, it'll help. And if we pray, maybe somebody out there is going to save us. Who knows? All right. So look at this. We pushed almost every single button on there to the max. What are the likelihoods on that, knowing that COP26 got that one and that one done? Okay. So how in the hell could I say we have hope? Because Katja taught us how we can have hope. Okay. So now we're going to put a price on carbon, and you can either hit the button here, or you can do it very specifically with the way you want to do it. So I want to tell you that we are really fortunate because our DFL in Minnesota, we have a senator who really believes that this is important. Her name is Tina Smith. I'm not saying the other one doesn't believe it's important, but Tina walks the talk. And she worked her butt off to create the clean energy payment program. And that just, all that work just got pitched overboard. It was horrible, wasn't it? Okay, but I want to show you that if we had enacted that, there is a way to see that right here. Are you ready? Did you see it move? Can you see these ones over here kind of squinching down a little bit?
Yeah.
And this went down 1/10 of a degree. It was something that it was a good thing to do, but it doesn't have a lot of long-term impact. And that's because it only affects our electricity production. What we're using for this building right now, it doesn't affect our cars, it doesn't affect our trucks, it doesn't affect our planes, our railroads, our ships. It doesn't affect our industries, not as much as it could. So it's a good thing. She worked her tail off with this, and I felt so badly for her, but anyways. So let's put a price on carbon. So Katya, it's $15 a ton, right?
Right.
It's like putting a dime on a gallon of gas. Okay, who here has seen gas go up by a dime recently? Did you stop buying gas? Did you complain about it?
Why? Why?
Okay, we're gonna have the price on carbon start to get phased in next year if we can get that 50th vote in the Senate right now. And we know that it's gonna take, if we do that, it's gonna take 1 year for them to get that legislation up and running. We know that if we add on $15 the first year and $10 a year every single year after that, out to the year 2100, that's 78 years from now. What's 10 times 78? 780, okay? And the first year was actually $15, so we're gonna call it 785. The final cost of a ton of carbon will be $785. Now, that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? Did you know that right now Congress has said, if you're a power company and you collect carbon from your power company's smokestack and put it in the ground, we'll pay you $50 a ton. It's called Q45. It's built into the tax code. And so this sounds kind of far-fetched. It's not that far-fetched. Finally, we're going to start getting our price put into place in the year 2022. And it's going to take us 78 years to get to full price. And you can see right here, this is our price in carbon going up, 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 up. And right here, see how everything immediately was affected by that price on carbon? Because it wasn't that dime or 10 cents on a gallon of gas. It was like, okay, they just made a law and in 10 years, it's gonna be $1 on a gallon of gas. And I gotta start doing something. I gotta plan for my business. I gotta plan for my home. I gotta plan what kind of car I'm gonna buy, Marlis.
Okay.
So
Okay.
look at what it did here. Did you see any other thing drop the temperature by that much? And I have to do this, sorry. I have to show the temperature. Did you see anything drop the temperature by that much out of all the other things we tried? Okay. Does a price on carbon, does it work? Please, somebody say something.
Seems to be the most bang for the buck.
It's the most bang for the buck. Is it the only thing that we need to do? But it is the single best thing that we can do. And it pays for itself. What other government program pays for itself, for God's sake? So what do we want?
Carbon
Tax.
When do we want it?
now.
Okay. So the important thing is, this is not the silver bullet. We just saw how you got lots of silver buckshot. This is the biggest piece of buckshot, but you need it all. Because this ain't gonna get you there, but it's gonna get you a hell of a lot closer. And this is the most important foundation, because every other thing you do, whether it's electrifying cars and trucks, improving your buildings, anything else, it's all predicated on, I don't want to pay that extra price for carbon. I'm going to do what I can to make my car, my home, my business more efficient. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just thinking about our transport system for electricity.
Yeah, the grid.
It stinks, right?
It does.
And the billions or trillions it's gonna take to do that. It's doable if the will is there.
That's right. That's right.
And I agree with everything that's said tonight. I just don't have any faith in our top business people make those decisions. I just don't.
Well, and I agree that it is always daunting to think about all the changes that need to happen. But do you see this?
Yeah, I got one.
Who here doesn't have one? Okay, well,
This was a bad audience to ask that.
thank you.
And I will not have one.
Okay, but this technology, how long ago did they come on the market? I don't remember. Was it 20 years ago?
1980.
The smartphone or a cell phone?
Smartphone.
Not too long ago.
Cell phones, 1989.
Okay, 89. Okay,
Smartphone's probably around 2000.
about 2000.
The first
Okay,
iteration.
to make a long story short, this happened in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is possible. This is why there is, you know, we can make changes if we choose to do them. People wanted this, and people have to understand that this is good. This is bad. Who here was choking on smoke this summer? Man, I was. I mean, it was just unbelievable. So I'll finish by saying that.
Mike, can I just say one more thing?
Yeah,
too,
please do.
okay?
Yeah.
I just want to answer to your discouragement about state of leadership and say that, like, I'm a historian by college degree. And, you know, when I first really looked climate change in the eye, you know, it just, you know, it's hard to see it. But then I started reading about, you know, the book that really helped me was William Wilberforce's heroic journey to end the slave trade. You know, he worked his entire lifetime for that. And I think, like, now it would be almost impossible for him to imagine how successful he was. And not in that there's no slavery in the world anymore, but that the idea that slavery is fine really almost does not exist anymore. And it's almost like a disease that has ceased to exist. And I just think, you know, what we're asking for is a lift in the moral caliber of our species. And that is not new. We have asked for that many times before, and it has happened. So I don't see any reason to see why we can't do it again, because we ended slavery, or we shouldn't say we, of course, but slavery ended. Slave trade ended, and the other thing I realized when I look at these major life issues is that, like, these things take a long time. Like, I started to feel like a wimp. You know, I've been working on climate change for 5 years. You know, how long did they work on slavery? 50 years actively, entire careers were spent. Think about civil rights. Like, what have we given up that people gave up for civil rights? You know, sometimes I think we have barely begun. We're not giving up anything yet. So I hear your discouragement, but I just think it's very important to choose to hope and to live based on the faith that, yes, the human race can make some changes.
And I agree. And Tom, I was just going to finish by saying that the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War II, there were many other wars, but those are three that America came through and did what needed to be done. And just reading about Eisenhower's warriors right now, I mean, what they had to do and how quickly they did it when they decided that it was time to do it was just awe-inspiring. 2 years ago, at the state legislature, Minnesota State Legislature, Representative Gene Wagenius invited Mark Seeley to host an entire panel from University of Minnesota that came in and gave hours and hours of testimony just exactly about what you're talking about.
This has to be a daily drumbeat in the
Yep.
media until
Yep, and so
people hear it. You hear it often enough,
I agree. I agree,
several of
Tom.
them should believe it.
Yep, and actually Paul Hutner has a weekly thing on Minnesota Public Radio called Climate Cast, where he does this. It should be every day. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That's why it was so nice to have people here tonight, and people in the audience online talking about this, because this truly is important. But Yale has a climate communications project that has looked at how many people in a US population are concerned about climate. And we just saw a presentation on this weekend, but it's like, I want to say over 50% are seriously worried about this problem. Okay,
I was gonna ask you, with Greta Thunberg coming on and bringing a lot of attention to this several years ago, a few years ago.
who was this?
Greta Thunberg?
Yes, Greta, yes.
Okay, so she's young, and when you see videos of other countries, there's a lot of young people that are all getting involved in this. Do you see that when you go down to the cities and you go to these workshops or whatever? Do you see a lot of young people also getting involved in this?
I think young people are absolutely like if you look at the degrees people get these days and what they're doing it with them, like virtually every young adult I know is doing something that didn't even exist 20 years ago. I have one niece growing sheep. I know a young man who's selling a new grain that comes from tilled fields where the fields are treated properly and soil is sequestered. I see a financial advisor who helps people divest from, or what's the word? Get out of fossil fuels, divest from fossil fuels. I see a woman who is working for a rainforest company. She works in the rainforest. They take one tree per 20 miles. They do it without building any roads. They take the tree out, pay the locals good money for it, and then make expensive furniture in the United States with it. I see another woman who advises corporations on how to lower, I mean, it's just endless. It's endless. I mean, the world is transforming. The faster it transforms, the less suffering there's going to be. That's the bottom line.
I have a question. It's kind of a shifting gear, but I think it's back towards the solution end, which I think we need to spend a lot of time on is what are the solutions to this, because it is a short timeline we're working.
Yes, it is.
Are there robust enough international organizations or an international government infrastructure to enforce these kinds of solutions? We
Well,
don't have it.
I
Everything
think
we've
there's a lot
talked
of-
about, these radical changes that are been at the national level, not the international level.
Right, so from my perspective, you look at what just happened in Glasgow. They did what they could. They didn't get much done. They historically have not. It's moved the needle in a way that it never has before. And they actually said the words fossil fuels this time, for the first time out of 25 years that they've been talking about this. This is the first time they said the words fossil fuels.
That's why we need more believers. They need
Exactly.
to be educated on how this machine works. I mean, I
But
saw
I
it.
will also say that you also need to be strategic.
Mhm.
Carbon pricing makes everyone into a problem solver, whether they believe in climate change or not. And that it's a very strategic move to make a huge change without needing everyone to be on board. And, you know, governments do not create political will. They respond to it. So they will eventually respond to it. But the way that the world has always worked is governments will be the last. And so it's actually up to us.
But again, the political will comes from the people,
It does.
and they must be educated and become believers. They have to know how this machine works.
Yep, that's right. And that's why I showed you this tonight. And I'm going to finish. Let me take 1 minute to finish this, if I may. I wanted to just tell you that you can do every single one of these buttons here. But if you don't affect our fossil fuels, if you don't keep them in the ground, you'll never win. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And the simplest, most politically expedient, doable, rapid, and beneficial way to do it is that carbon price. And that's why she's such an advocate for it, and I am, because people much smarter than us have figured this out, that this is the smart way to go.
And most of the world, it already is. We are the slow ones.
Yeah, there's only 2 developed countries in the world that don't put a price on carbon right now. Guess which one is it that we're standing in?
And the other is Australia, right? And they're already moving, they took it away, they had it, took it away, and now they're moving back to it.
So I don't know if that answers your question, Todd.
No, it does. I mean, at some point in time, economics is going to rule.
Right.
things.
And
Isn't necessarily
not
gonna
very far in the future,
Yeah.
according to, I mean, for
Well-
some people, I just listened to a Vox, if anyone listens to Vox, a long interview that was really amazing. And he basically said, this is a train that is rolling. There is absolutely no stopping it. And the losers will just be the ones who don't see it, you know, whether that's fossil fuel companies or our country. Maybe we're gonna be the losers in this because, you know, we're just behind. And it's gonna be the new you know, world competition. And it's not gonna be based on money, it's gonna be based on success.
According to your graph, where's the tripwire? I don't know if the point of no return,
They're saying that when we get to 1.5 degrees,
and that,
that things are gonna start to snowball, or they call it a tipping point, whatever you wanna call it.
so in my eyes, it's bad. What are we looking at for a year on that graph?
That is 2030.
That's with the carbon price,
No,
or
no,
what you have up there now.
it's just saying that as soon as this line gets up to 1.5 degrees, you're gonna see bad things happen like you've never seen before. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Basically,
And it's not very long from now.
And what we talked about earlier about the slavery thing,
Exactly.
that's 200 years, we got 8 years.
That's true. It's very true.
Yeah.
But by the same token, the gay marriage issue, how many years did that take before it really flipped? And I'm not saying that it's going to happen. I'm not guaranteeing anything. But I'll go back to the first quote that I gave you. We all do better when we all do better. And this is a way that we can all do better if enough people get behind it. And that means
And what's the alternative? To say, oh, well, it's not gonna work.
if you shrug
We'll
your
all just go down
shoulders,
a big ball of smoke.
Yeah.
Right, I don't want to be mistaken, I agree.
No, I know,
Yep,
I'm
yep.
saying that just
But
theoretically.
what Tom said, you know, the influencer would be, folks, you got 8 years. If that doesn't rattle somebody,
it does.
we've got grandchildren, I don't know how many grandchildren we got here.
Mhm.
But it's funny how the human psyche works though, because we've been saying this for way more than 20 years or 8 years. I mean, I don't know.
So,
Human beings are funny things.
Dwayne, I think the sentiment you're expressing, and I share some of your pessimism in some ways, reminds me of a New Yorker, one of my favorite New Yorker cartoons. And that's the CEO in front of, you know, his shareholders saying, you know, the end of the world is going to be terrible. But in that few decades before the end, there's massive profit.
Yeah.
Because there is that incentive.
Yes.
You know.
Well, and look at when Al Gore, you know, brought all this up and everybody's like, oh, come on, you know.
So
that's
he just celebrated the 15th anniversary.
Is that what that was?
That picture, that big picture of all the people, he was in the center in the front.
Oh, I didn't even.
And it's
see
been 15 years ago. He started that with 50 people in his barn.
Wow.
So
And so
a lot has been done.
a lot has been done. I mean, honestly, in 2015, Republicans would not use the word climate change in Congress. Okay. Right now, we're one vote away from that.
And Mitt Romney is for price of carbon.
Oh,
He
and
can't
so
vote
are
for
others.
reconciliation, but he publicly will, moderate Republicans I think, look at this more clearly than
Yep.
far left Democrats.
Yep.
This is not a partisan thing.
But
It
it's,
would be nice for one of them to cross the aisle.
it won't happen.
I know. I would-
It won't. We asked that question. We had a big fall conference this last weekend. I mean, it was just a great conference. It talked all about this. But basically, we need Joe Manchin to vote yes. And if he does, we can get that price on carbon.
So we're saying it's not political, but it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, my hope is if it doesn't go now, it's gonna go next year in a clean bill. It's all its own. That is bipartisan. Maybe in the long run, that's better. I don't know. No one knows history.
So what we're asking is, we're asking people to talk about this, just like Tom says, talk about it every damn day, every day. Talk about it with people, your neighbors, your kids, Thanksgiving, and it's not to pick fights, it's to bring it up and talk to people about it, but then also pick this up and use it and call your members of Congress, because it's simple, but it works. It doesn't change things just like that. But as she said, we called 155,000 phone calls, I
I
think,
don't remember the number.
in the
yet.
last 2 or 3 months across the nation to Congress. That's 155,000 phone calls. That's a lot. And every single phone call said, please put a price on carbon. That's what we ask people to say. Please put a price
This
on
is just
carbon.
people like you. We're asking everybody, not people that
Yep.
are already activists.
Now-
whatever.
That was 155,000 calls. How many people live in America?
About 350 million.
65.
If they would have had 350 million calls, you think that they'd still be waiting to do this?
So
all-
citizensclimatelaw.org. That's
Yep.
the way to make your calls. It makes it easy for you. It gives you a script.
Yep.
It tells you exactly what to do. And
So,
it tells you when to do it. And it's the baseline activity that every American should be doing.
so that's it. I'm done. I want to say thank you